Hello, hello. Happy Friday. This is now episode 7. So if you don't know who I already am, this is your host, Leticia. And this is the Healing with Leticia Reflections from a Therapist podcast. So if you are a returning listener, thank you so much for coming back. I am happy to have you here. And if you are a new listener, welcome. And I hope that you enjoy this podcast. So let's see. Today I was pondering what it was that I was going to follow up with, because the last episode was about something that I'm very passionate about, which is about boundaries and just a lot of hard lessons that were taught with not having good enough boundaries. And so, I'll be completely transparent. For today's episode, I didn't jot anything down. I didn't plan. So I think that that's actually okay sometimes, just to kind of go off of whatever is on the forefront. And I think that today may be a little bit of a follow-up from the last episode. And what I was thinking is, for those of you that are new with establishing boundaries, or maybe you realized from my last episode that you are lacking boundaries in all of the areas that I mentioned. I believe I said there were 7 different areas of your life that you need to make sure that you have boundaries with. And then there's obviously, time boundaries and just financial boundaries, all kinds of boundaries, right? So if you haven't listened to that episode, I would recommend you go back on that one. So then that way, this one will make a little bit more sense. So let's see. I wanted to give you maybe some examples of how it was that I started to implement some, especially as a beginner. So I imagine that if, you're listening to this episode and you're feeling like, okay, so now I know that I'm lacking boundaries with my family, or I'm lacking boundaries in my friendships or romantic relationships. Now what do I do? And I'm sorry for having to clear up my throat, but for whatever reason, I think my throat chakra has been kind of acting up lately. So probably something in regards to also having to speak some type of truth. I don't know. For those of you that believe in that. So anyways, so let's see. So I'll give you an example. For me, in my life, the areas that having lack of boundaries have affected me the most have been with family and also romantic relationships. A little bit with friendships from time to time, but that one hasn't always been, the biggest issue in my life, because I've had, for the most part, really good friends that are, mutual, and, they care to know how I feel about things. So, obviously that's a healthy relationship, but in the types of relationships where you could have someone who is more self-centered and, cares about what they can get from you, then these are going to be the type of people that don't like that you all of a sudden implement some type of boundary. And that means withholding whatever it is that they're used to getting from you. So with family, I've had to ask myself, even before seeing them. So, let's just say that for some of you listening, this could be the case, because family tends to be one of the biggest areas of people's lives that the clients that I work with, as well as myself, from experience, they tend to be the ones that cross boundaries the most, and they think that it's normal because they're your family. So I've had to decide, in advance, like let's just say that I make plans to see someone that is from my family. I need to ask myself, first and foremost, how am I feeling right now emotionally, physically, energetically, just, all of these different check-ins with myself to know if I'm going to be able to handle the energy exchange and even the withdrawal of energy of being around a certain individual. So let's just say that for you, maybe it isn't family. But regardless of who it is, right? You do need to check in with yourself to see how you're doing. And let's just say that you have someone that is calling you, and you know that they're calling you because they need your feedback or they need you in some type of way. And this could be family too, or maybe someone else for that matter. Before answering the phone, or even before meeting up with this person, asking yourself, how do I feel right now? But also, do I have the capacity to be able to be there for this person right now? Because there is going to be a withdrawal of energy from me. So if I'm already feeling depleted before I even talk to this person or before I even see this person, should I really be answering that phone call? Should I be making plans to see this individual? And that is, the mindfulness that comes with this, which, to me, it's huge to practice being mindful in your day-to-day, because that way you can start to pay attention more to how you feel about things, whether it be about a person, a situation, an experience, whatever it is. Pay attention to how you feel before you just make a quick decision, because a person who usually is lacking boundaries tends to also have some people pleasing tendencies. So that means that you might say yes to something that really you shouldn't have said yes to, just because you were worried that the person was going to be upset with you. Maybe you're answering that phone call because you're worried that that person is going to feel rejected, or they're not going to want to talk to you, or maybe you let them down. So, now you're being responsible for someone else's feelings, but then at the same time, you're also dismissing how you feel right now. So I always check in with myself before I make plans with someone. And if there is ever a time that I am not sure, I make sure to voice that. So that might sound like, I'll get back to you. I need to check my schedule. I'll let you know. So then that way you're not feeling like you're putting yourself on the spot with having to give an answer to something that later on you may be kicking yourself about, because now you resent those plans, or you really don't feel like seeing that person, or whatever that looks like. Okay. Now, another thing that people tend to forget a lot about is that you have the right to also change your mind. So let's just say that you do make plans with someone, and maybe you did feel okay in that moment to say yes to a party or whatever it is. And then the day's approaching and you're feeling that you had a hard week, you're feeling tired, whatever the case may be, right? Like you're just not in a good headspace. It is totally okay to change your mind. Okay? It is okay to decide that you pick yourself over the commitment. And I think that a lot of people struggle with keeping the commitment to someone else, but then also instead dismissing their own needs and their own feelings and just not being in tune with what it is that they need in that moment. Because again, it goes back to the people pleasing. So would you also be then maybe not having a boundary for yourself? Because that to me would be that you don't have a good balance, right? Like you don't have a good balance. You don't honor how you're feeling. And it's more important to you to keep a commitment to someone else now. And it could be the narrative, it could be the story that you're telling yourself, that if I cancel, if I don't attend because I already said I was going to attend, then this person's going to think this about me and that about me. And then, and then it just turns into all of these conclusions about things that, most likely may not even happen. Now, there is a difference between this and what you call, or what most people would call, like a flake, right? Like a person who's always canceling, a person who overbooks, a person who is scattered. That's different. if you know that you're not that type of person, and you tend to most likely keep your plans, but hey, from time to time life happens and you don't always know how you're going to feel as you get closer to the plans that you made, then you most definitely have the right to change plans or sometimes cancel them, because it's okay to honor how you're feeling. So, I believe that the people that love and care about you, the people who actually care about your feelings, they're not going to be upset with you if this happens every so often. Now, if it's more often than not, then that would be something different, right? Because I've had experiences with people that, because they're so people pleasing, they say yes to a multitude of different plans, and then they overbook themselves, and so that can come off to be a bit sloppy, right? Like as far as like a friend who is showing up late or needs to reschedule all of the time, or they don't show up when they say that they're going to do something. So I think having a middle ground between both of these is important. So hopefully that makes sense. Now, going back to checking in with yourself, right? So part of that is asking yourself, can I answer that phone call? Can I really be there for that person right now? Like, how am I feeling? Do I feel okay? Because I honestly don't believe in giving from your cup. So when I talk about a cup, I'm talking about, what are you filling yourself up with as far as like your self-care, right? When I work with clients, I usually talk about an emotional bank account analogy. So I'll say, we are an emotional bank, right? So self-care being the deposits. So every time that we do something for ourselves, we are depositing into ourselves. So we are actually filling up our bank account. And then life comes about. And then there are withdrawals. Okay? Life does not stop, right? So there are sometimes more challenges at any given moment. Then, we keep having these withdrawals happen. And then if we're not also depositing self-care and self-awareness and the things that we need to do to keep up with ourselves, then we end up leaving ourselves in the negative. So hopefully that makes sense, because I think that for clients, that tends to help them understand why self-care is that important. And that definitely goes hand in hand with having boundaries for yourself. So I will ask myself, can I or can I not be there for that person right now? Can I answer that phone call right now? Am I going to show up to that family event? Because I know whoever's going to be there is going to trigger me in some type of way. And if I know that the answer is no, then I will not go. And that might look like, hey, I don't feel good right now. Okay? Sometimes it is hard to tell an actual person why it is that you can't do that thing. Because maybe they might, let's just say it's a narcissistic person. And, not everyone is narcissistic. And I know that term is overly used right now. But let's just say that you really do have a narcissistic family member. And I have a lot of these. So I have to be careful with how I share what it is that I cannot do or what I can do and what that reason is or isn't. Because that might turn into a blow up or someone attacking you and, some type of verbal, emotional abuse. So it's okay to pick your words, to make sure that you're protecting yourself. But nonetheless, you don't have to go to this event. You don't have to do something that doesn't feel good for you, especially if you don't have the emotional, mental capacity to be able to handle that situation. Okay? Now, if I know that I'm not doing well in some type of way, or I've had a long week, I don't usually have an issue with telling someone that I can't go because I'm feeling tired, or, I've had a rough week. So again, if you feel guilty, you got to really ask yourself, am I feeling guilty because I'm putting my own guilt and shame onto myself, because I'm creating a negative narrative, because I think that if I cancel, then I am now criticizing myself and telling myself I'm a bad friend, this person's not going to want to hang out with me again. All of these negative narratives that we tend to be the ones that create them. Most likely other people don't think these things. And now, again, you have to really compare yourself to what I said earlier, right? Like, are you a flake, or are you a person who just does this from time to time because you honor how you feel? And there's nothing wrong with that. Okay, because most people will tell me, obviously clients will tell me, I hate flakes, when they don't show up, or they say that they're going to do this and then they don't. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about there are going to be times where you cannot always plan to have the energy, to have the mental and emotional capacity to do something when you're just not doing well. And that's okay. So giving yourself permission to honor how you're feeling in the moment is super important. And this also very much connects with your self-esteem. How do you treat yourself? Do you honor how you're feeling in the moment? Or do you force yourself and push yourself out of guilt and shame to do things and keep commitments to things that really just hurt you at the end of the day? So being able to share this with the people that you love and care about is important, because boundaries do teach other people to know how to respect you and to be able to know what your limits are, right? Like, these are my limits. These are my boundaries. I'm not okay doing certain activities, or, I don't want you calling me past 10 o'clock. Like, I'm in bed at 9 or something, right? Like, these are boundaries. So I think one of the biggest parts is just giving yourself permission to know that it's okay to be able to tell someone that, hey, I'm not going to go to that thing because I'm not feeling great right now. Or maybe I don't even feel comfortable with something that I originally said yes to. And I think that an important reminder also is that if you speak your truth originally the first time, you don't have to go back on changing plans and, just certain things that you're agreeing to. So having to break your commitments, because originally you could have just taken your time to decide whether that experience or those plans was something that you really wanted to do. And that way you are less likely with having to go back on plans and feeling like you're a flake, or you don't, keep your commitments, whatever those fears are for you. This is why being mindful, slowing down, checking in with yourself, seeing how your week is going is really important. And then that way you can tell that person or that family member, hey, I may or may not go, or I need some time to think about this. And I always come back to, when family members or friends or whoever it is, your partner, are throwing guilt trips at you. Well, you said, or, you always do this, or, this is your family. Those are all manipulation tactics to get you to do something that they want you to do. And that is still not okay. I always repeat this to my clients in therapy and even to friends. But, if someone continues to push you, even after you say, I am not comfortable with that, like, I just don't feel comfortable with that situation or that person or whatever that activity is, and someone continues to push you because they think that you should want to do what they're asking you to do, then that means that that person has their own individual agenda. And they're not really considering your feelings anyways. So I think I said this in the last podcast, but anytime that someone makes you feel bad because all of a sudden now you're trying to implement some boundary, it's because they don't benefit from you having them. And, maybe this can be an experiment for you. Maybe take a step back. And if you feel like you're doing too much in certain friendships or relationships or family relationships, take your energy back a bit and start investing it into yourself. And if some of these relationships start to maybe get disconnected, if they start to get more quiet, or they're not as interactive anymore, it may have been because of what you were doing to keep it going. And sometimes in a sneaky way, that could be the people-pleasing tendencies that someone has when they don't have good boundaries. So I think that that's all that I'm going to say for today because it is going on to now 20 minutes and I don't want this to be super long. But hopefully that makes sense, right? So a quick recap. I don't know if that might be helpful for what I've already talked about. And I'm sorry if I'm coming off a little bit scattered today. Again, I don't have like any bullet points, like I didn't type anything up. And I also don't always want it to have to be like that because again, that's the reason why I changed the name to this podcast to Reflections of a Therapist. So if you're new here, I think starting from the last episode, I changed it to that name instead of Lessons from a Therapist, because sometimes it isn't always going to be organized in a way where it's a teaching lesson. It might just be some thoughts that I have from maybe some sessions that I had that week. Anything that might be particularly on my mind for that week, and maybe it stems from something that might be important to share. So I don't want it to have to be super rigid, and it may not always be therapy related. It may not always be something that needs to be structured in a teaching lesson, if that makes sense. Okay, but nonetheless, I hope that you get something out of this episode and future episodes as well. Something that I am possibly thinking about for the next episode are how to change and maybe even create new healthy habits. And this may also include me sharing more about what is happening with me right now, which might be helpful also for me to keep myself motivated and accountable because, let's be honest, it's hard to create new habits and also change things that are not healthy, especially when all of these could be tying into our mental health. So I definitely would like to dive into that maybe in the next episode. I guess we'll see how it goes. But anyhow, I do hope that you have something planned for this weekend. It is Friday. It's one of my favorite days of the week. So hopefully you do something nice for yourself. Hopefully you have plans to do something for yourself individually, for your own self-care, which is something that I was talking about in this episode and in all episodes, really. Always make sure to do something to deposit into your bank account, your emotional bank account. And the way that I always end my episodes so far, it's with Dr. Pat Allen's saying,
we all need something to do. We all need someone to love. And we all need something to look forward to. So I do hope that you all have all three. And if you don't, make some time to make some space for all of these, okay? Take care, be safe, and I will catch you in my next episode. Take care.